Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today we are going to preview Hawthorn and everything they've got to offer us for SuperCoach 2017. Now in these previews we take a look at a few guys that could be breakout candidates or coming back from injury or just players that generally should be on your radar at this time of year for SuperCoach. And Hawthorn, of course, they went in straight sets after some dominant years. Best club in the modern era, and they are now facing what looks like a likely decline. But going through their list, I don't think that's going to be the case for their SuperCoach prospects. For what it's worth, I do think they could potentially even fall out of the 8, such as the competitive nature of the AFL competition at the moment. But going through their side, there are certainly some opportunities for some guys to fill the void that's been left by the likes of Sam Mitchell and Jordan Lewis. And of course, they were fairly active in the trade period to fill those voids. And of course, none more so than Jaeger O'Meara. Now, he's the man that's on everyone's lips. He'll be a massive talking point, and I think it's certainly worth discussing him a lot, even at this early stage, when the fact is it'll all depend on his pre-season. Now, I'll first up say that unless he has an unbelievable pre-season and just destroys the pre-season matches and is looking $1 million, Jaeger O'Meara will not be on my side. Now, the reason being, the bloke hasn't played footy for 2 years. He's had chronic knee issues time and time again. He's looked good, then his body's let him down. And of course, after you've been out of the game for so long, things like just general knee soreness can be so hard to keep away for every 2 to 3 weeks. When he did play, his first 2 seasons were of course outstanding, and all the fuss about him was definitely justified. Averaged 90.1 in 2013 I should say, 97.7 in 2014. And of course then the disappointment of seeing what looked like one of the best next generation players and one of the next gun midfielders of our game. He's been struck down. And of course, played his footy at the Gold Coast Suns, now finds himself as a Hawk. Now, last year he was priced at $316,000, didn't play a game again, and somehow his price has managed to go up. He's priced at $318,900, and of course, is just a midfielder. Now, at first I thought, oh, gee, come on, SuperCoach, stop being so stingy, just give us a discount on the bloke. You know, put him to around $200,000 where he should be. But when I really thought about it, I felt that that's probably not the worst thing, because it creates exactly what we're doing right now, and it creates a real tough decision and healthy discussion. If he was around the 180 to 220 mark, every man and his dog would snap him up. And the fact is, it doesn't really mean that much if everyone has him, because he just becomes irrelevant. You know, it's just everyone's got him, so he's just a piece of everyone's puzzle. But now I think it could be a massive point to your side whether you start him or not. Now, the easy thing to do is lock him in. He's O'Meara, he's a gun, going to be a superstar. If you're going to have a good pre-season, lock him in. I don't think it's as simple as that. He has not played footy for so long. Now, I'll compare him to Daniel Menzel, who, of course, O'Meara isn't quite at that stage, and he hasn't had quite as many, or by the exact same nature of the knee injury. But nonetheless, I think Menzel is an absolute superstar, and I felt that it's taken him so long to find his best footy, and he's still finding it. And I think sometimes when we look on spectators, we just go, look, he hasn't played for a bit, give him a few months on the track, he'll be back to those 97 averages as soon as we know it. It's not that simple. I don't think it's that easy. He's going to miss games, no doubt about that. I'll of course monitor him through the pre-season, for sure. Everyone will be. But for mine, he's going to have to do a lot of convincing. I think the $318 price tag is a bit awkward and a bit too much for me, to be honest, because I don't think we're going to see him get 95 plus average. I wouldn't be thinking he's going to produce those sort of numbers. What we'd be hoping for is around that 85 to 90, and in a perfect world, closer to 90. Now, how possible is that? I mean, it's possible for sure, but I just think it's highly unlikely. As I said at the top, he's going to have to really blow your socks off in that pre-season games and everything that he's doing on the track, because personally I think it's an enormous risk. I'm probably taking the philosophy of no mid-price players in the midfield this season. I haven't in the past, but I think this season I'm going to play it a little safer, particularly when a lot of people will start with Fife and Beams. Now, if you add on O'Meara to that, all of a sudden you've got three guys who are very prone to injury and are returning from, really tough leg injuries. So it's a risk that you take. A lot of people will go with him, but I don't think he's an automatic selection. I think we're going to have to look at his pre-season form extremely closely, and even then, I don't believe he's an out-and-out lock. So he's worth discussing. A lot of people will have him, but for me, at this stage, it's looking very unlikely that I'll be running with the Jaeger bomb. But one man that I am extremely excited about, and that's Tom Mitchell. I think he could explode next season. Now, of course, he showed all the signs as a Swan, but has been held back behind that midfield pecking order at the Swans with the likes of Parker, Hanbury, Kennedy, such a strong midfield, Kieran Jack as well, and Jarryd McVeigh when he was up and running in the midfield. Now, he's had to bide his time. Longmire really made him work hard for it. We saw unbelievable NEFL numbers, which were well documented, and we have equally seen some great SuperCoach numbers. Of course, the last 2 years have been pretty solid, averaging 104 and 104.5. Now, there's no doubting he's an absolute ball magnet, and I do believe that he could go around the 110 mark. What he lacked at the Swans was genuine opportunity in the guts of that midfield. At the heart of every stoppage, he would be there. But unfortunately, he had to compete with Kennedy, Hanbury, and the like. Parker, of course. Now, Mitchell's ideal game is getting down on the knees, dishing pills out, getting the hard ball, tackling hard. That's exactly what he needs to do, and it's his A game. That's his bread and butter. And I think he'll walk into a Hawthorn side who Sam Mitchell has left, who Jordan Lewis has left, and I think the opportunity is staring him right in the face to just own that, right at the tapping zone. I think it's extremely likely that he'll see huge time spent in the midfield, and arguably, depending on how O'Meara goes, I think he will be their number one mids, Tommy Mitchell, and I think that could give him the opportunity to really boost his points. Some of the numbers: he averages 27.9 touches, 12 contested, 6.2 tackles, 104 SuperCoach points, and 3.6 clearances a game. Now, that's the number I can really see exploding, and particularly the contested ball as well, a little bit too. He averaged pretty well through the finals as well, which I think is worth noting. The fact that he's a big game player, I think, is important. Scored 72, 116, 116 and 106 in the grand final. But I think he must have turned it over a bit in the grand final, but he was certainly one of their better players, in particular in that first half. Time on ground's an interesting point to look at too. He spent 80.4% time on ground in 2016, and I think most A-grade midfielders and the cream of the crop for your side, you'll tend to go in the high 80s as a general rule, maybe low 90s as a midfield, depending how many rotations they're rolling through, and I think Mitchell will get that sort of opportunity at the Hawks. So at the moment, he's in my side, and I think he's a very unique pick. Well, I hope he's going to be a unique pick. I think the fact that he's priced at 104 gives them real scope for improvement, not only in the scoring, but you can get him at a relatively cheap price. He's been long touted as SuperCoach Roll Gold, and I think in 2017 we will actually see him fulfil that potential. I think he could get plenty of the ball, just contested ball. He's a good handball. His kicking has a little bit to be desired, but I think he can finally get his exact role that he's been looking for in his AFL career, and that's, I guess, similar to what Tom Liberatore was playing at his peak with the Dogs, where he was averaging, around your 112s, 113s, I think, from memory. So that's what I'm hoping for. I think he's very capable, but of course we'll have to wait and see how he fits into his new side. But it definitely looks promising, and the opportunity is absolutely there for the taking. Another man we'll have a look at is Cyril Rioli. Now, you'll probably go, Shorty, spare me the next few minutes, mate. I'm not going to pick Cyril. He's just going to twang a hammy. Well, last year he did improve in that area, and he has been able to get his body far more consistently on the park. Of course, he really struggled to do that for a long time in his career. He averaged 90.1 last year. That followed averages of 92.8, 92.5, 88 in 2013, followed by, prior to a couple of season and career highs 98.6 and 99.6. So they're big numbers, albeit going back 5 years. Now I guess the question is, he's a forward. We've lost a few options in our forward line. Of course, as I said with Tom Mitchell, there is opportunity in that midfield for the Hawks, and he's been touted as a guy who will one day make his way into the midfield. That's always been something that's sort of been linked with Cyril Rioli. You know, how good will he be when he goes into the midfield? He gets thrown in there from time to time, but could he play consistently through there? And that's where my point lies. At this stage, I mean, you'd be a very brave man to pick him, but I think it's definitely the type of guy you got to look at, because we've lost a few options in the forward line. He's priced pretty nicely. The opportunity could await him. Will he play in the midfield? We're not too sure. Like we really need to see that he's rolling through there consistently. And I suppose, looking at it quite simply, Lewis and Mitchell go out, O'Meara and Tom Mitchell come in. You know, why would Rioli play any different role? You know, I could probably wear that as a fair point, but Clarkson might be looking for a bit of extra zip in that midfield and finally use Rioli in the role that many thought he would probably play by this stage in his career. And I guess last year it went the opposite. I mean, he had his lowest average disposals per game, which I think was 13.7. That's the lowest in his career. And he averaged the most goals. So he kicked, 47 goals at 2.2 per game. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that he played far more permanent forward than ever before, and to quite good success as well. But will that be going the other way now? Will he become less of a permanent forward, more of a permanent mid? Time will tell, but I think it's worth having on the radar, and I guess that's what these previews are all about. He's priced at $490k, and I think if we can see a combination of midfield time, good pre-season, and further proof that he's over those injuries, then all of a sudden, maybe if you're a brave man, Cyril Rioli again comes into consideration. So we'll have to wait and see. Another man that has hurt us over the time with his injuries, but equally has provided us with some great times in Supercoach land, is Luke Hodge. And again, you're probably scoffing at me. Shorty, he's not going to play enough games for me. Don't even bother. Well, hear me out. I know he's nearly 33, he's getting pretty old, but don't let him be defined by his age. We've seen plenty of 30 plus guys put together great seasons. Now, what does it come down to? The pre-season. It always does, but even more so for these older guys. Time and time again, we've seen blokes who look like they're on the out, look like they're a year away from retirement. All of a sudden, they have a career best season, and halfway through the year, we talk to them like, mate, why are you having a career best year? You know, why are you back to your best? And, you know, they always answered the same thing. You know, I haven't had a good pre-season for years. I've been on limited programs. Finally, I got a clear run at it. I had a great summer. I hit the ground running, and I felt good again. Could this be the case for Luke Hodge? We'll have to wait and see, because again, in 2016, where he averaged 88.4, he did suffer some injuries. Of course, he had some knee problems and a broken arm to some extent, I think it was, after Mitch Duncan ran into him in the round one clash. He was priced at $481,000, and the big thing is he's a defender. I always thought when Luke Hodge returned to the defensive line that he'd be very close to a lock. Now, of course, the obvious worry is his body, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he might play every game, because that'd be hugely unlikely. Again, he's another candidate for playing more midfield time. He probably won't change his role up too much, but he is a bit of a general. You know, we know what Luke Hodge is about. When the big moments arrive, he's generally not too far away, and I still think that'll be the case next year. And I certainly think he's a player we should keep on our radar. Now, I will throw some numbers at you here. After round 20 last year, and including finals, so it was 6 games, he averaged 107.3. Now, he did have a fairly interrupted first half and maybe a little bit more start of the season. You know, he suffered those injuries, didn't quite get going. But when he did get going, those numbers were evidence that he still can certainly score. And one thing with him that we know, when the chips are down, he basically always delivers. Now, will he produce those amazing numbers that he once did from week to week? Certainly not. But the fact that he's a defender and he's a capable guy of averaging 3 figures, he must be considered. So, last year, 88.5 he averaged, 2015, 108. Now, I'd be lying to you if I thought he could average 108. But I definitely feel that if he can get a crack at the pre-season and get through it extremely well, then all of a sudden we could be seeing a fully fit Luke Hodge, who is definitely capable of averaging, at the very least, your high 90s, early hundreds. Now, certainly the concern is that he won't play every game, and I think that's a given. I couldn't see him playing every game. If the Hawks are travelling nicely towards the end of the season, he's always a candidate to get rested, and he probably will be anyway certain periods. Of course, the added buys in the season may help. Of course, they're brought in to not only refresh players, but not have so many guys just being rested for the sake of it. So, track him. I'm interested to see how he goes. He's a real tempter. When you see the name Luke Hodge in defender status, it always, really pricks the ears up and has to be considered. So take a look at how Hodgie's going through the pre-season. Now, I'll just finish off with Jarryd Roughead. Now, of course, he's priced cheaply because he didn't play last season. $367,000 in the forward line. Now, of course, since 2011, he's averaged 95 plus, and one of the best and probably rare key position players that we can select with a fair amount of confidence in SuperCoach. But I wouldn't really be endorsing Ruffy for next season. I know he's cheap. I know he's returned to the track, which is fantastic. But for him to produce great numbers, it's just probably not going to happen, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, he's going to return to the game, which is step one. And him playing great footy, unfortunately, is step two. He's just trying to get himself right and get back to the park. And of course, naturally, we would expect to see a fairly rusty and work his way into the season. We all hope that he does get back and play some good footy. And of course, and above all, just live a healthy life. At this stage, it looks like that is going quite well, which is great. But as far as SuperCoach goes, I think there's better options out there. Like with Hodge, when you scroll down and you see Roughead and he's cheap and he's tracking along well in the summer, of course, you take note, but personally, I wouldn't expect him to burst onto the scene. He hasn't played for a year. He's got a bit more on his plate now than just playing good footy. He's another guy that, will be monitored and managed through the season, and we could see a great second half of the year. He could average in the second half of the year anywhere around 100 if he gets going, but I don't think in the first half of the season we'll see consistent footy from him, and he's a real big unknown. So tread with caution there, despite the great Jaeger Roughead name that we've become accustomed to producing good scores. So that's about all for the Hawks, I think. There were certainly a few options. I must say, when I looked through them, I didn't think I'd see a stack of options with the decline of your Birchells and your Gibsons, and of course, Rioli is always a risk, but there were a few that popped up, and it was quite interesting to discuss, because while the Hawks may drop up a little bit, I think there's definitely some options that could provide some great value and possibly even be unique for our SuperCoach side. So they're definitely worth having a look at, even if they are slightly aging. They're trying to regenerate for sure, the Hawks, and they're a great club, so you'd back them in to be there and abouts once again. But that's enough of me for the SuperCoach and the Hawks today. Let me know your thoughts on the video and everything you're thinking with the Hawks as well. If you got any players that I missed, certainly let me know. If you got any feedback on how this video went or anything in general, certainly throw it out there. Subscribe to the channel as always. It's always great to see a few other people get on board, and give the video a like as well and share it around if you enjoyed it. That'd be fantastic. I'll see you guys shortly.